Say what you wanna say to me now. I wanna wake up with you in the morning. Show me this.
Hey, what's going on?
What's going on? Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We've kind of did a sabbatical.
It wasn't no sabbatical. I worked hard. I don't know what you're talking about.
Anyway.
I need a sabbatical for my sabbatical.
But anyways, you guys, we apologize. We have been off for a couple of weeks.
Okay, you need to stop telling people we were off.
Okay,
we were not
hard.
Off.
So we are directors for a church youth camp, and we went and conducted or directed, I guess you would say,
yes.
this amazing youth camp, but it was a lot of work, like a lot. And it wasn't just because it was hot, but it was a lot of work. However, it was amazing, and we just loved just how free the campers became. It was just amazing. So either way, but we're back, and so we hope that you've missed us. We hope that we were missed, but we missed you guys as well. So welcome back to our Loved by You podcast. And I'm your host, Carrie L, and my co-host,
Me, R.A. Roberts.
Yes. So you guys, we are back for episode 21. And we are so excited because this one is our singles and married edition. The topic is fighting fair. And the reason why it's a single and married edition, because I think everybody, regardless of whether you're in a friendship or even a romantic relationship, you need to learn how to fight fair. I would say that fighting fair is definitely something that is a skill set that you have to learn. It's essential to a good relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship. Wouldn't you say, babe?
Yeah, I would agree. I think even as friends need to learn to fight fair. And I think some of these same tactics and steps would work for that. So, yeah.
Exactly. So, let's get into it, right? So what does fighting fair look like?
Well, fighting fair looks like is that when you both wear the same gloves and they get checked beforehand, and they're taped, and the ref signs them to make sure, and then you have a set agreed upon rules.
Okay.
Whether you're gonna do old school and it's 20 paces and then you turn, or
I think that's with the shoot 'em ups. That's not necessarily
I'm just
boxing.
And by shoot 'em ups, you mean westerns.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I call them shoot 'em ups because my great uncle, when he would watch westerns, he would call them shoot 'em ups, and so that's just what I call them. I absolutely love to call them shoot 'em ups.
I know you do.
Bonanza. What was the other ones?
I don't know. I did.
You never watch westerns?
No.
And you think you know a person. Really?
I mean, they played, but I didn't watch them. But anyways, you're getting off track.
Okay, so yes. All right. Fighting fair, what does it look like? So just a question. Like, is it like giving your spouse the silence treatment? Which they call this in the psychology world stonewalling, where you're pretty much ignoring that person or you're not talking to that person in order to, I guess, punish them. Most people I have heard, it's not necessarily punishment, because especially if your spouse talks a lot, when they give you the silence treatment, it's not a punishment. But either way, that's neither here or there. Is it not doing anything for your spouse? I think a lot of times when we're mad at each other, we'd be like, well, he wanted me to do this around the house, and I ain't doing this, so he gonna take that kind of thing.
You gonna learn today.
You gonna learn today, right? Exactly.
Right.
Or is it like giving negative body language? And I would say that just confession time. I used to be. I'm not as bad as I was before, or in the earlier years of our marriage. But I was notorious for giving negative body language. I would not say a word, or I didn't have to say a word because my body language would say it all. And that is, our body definitely has a language on its own. I always say my face has a language on its own. So my face will probably cuss you out before my mouth ever would. So, yeah, I think those are the questions I would have for, is that what fighting fair looks like?
I would say all of those are not fighting fairly.
Nor is it putting on gloves and getting them signed by what did you say, the referee?
The ref. In boxing, before they box, the ref comes out, he checks their gloves, and he tapes their gloves to make sure they can't put any weight or anything in the gloves.
People do that?
Professional boxing, yes, that's what they do.
No, I'm saying they put like weights and stuff in their gloves.
People cheat in every kind of way they can in every sport.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
I would have never thought about putting a weight in my glove. Like, that has to be uncomfortable.
So anyway,
I'm just saying.
No, I don't believe that any of those are fighting fair, even as the introvert who would love silence. And I think, honestly, a lot of times when people are trying to do these negative reactions, a lot of times the person that they're mad at or doing these things against don't even realize.
Right.
Like,
and so you're doing it really for naught because you're like, I'm mad and I'm all upset and I'm, giving him the silent treatment or whatever. And it's really, sometimes it doesn't even phase that other person.
And I think I would say that the main two that I hear and read about people using is the silence treatment and withholding things, like withholding sex or intimacy and stuff like that. And really, my question is always, who are you hurting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I would say in the platonic friend realm, like when people are mad at me or not talking to me, like, it really doesn't bother me because my response is always, you're going to need me before I need you. And that is always the case. So
yeah, I don't know. It sounds a little harsh when you say stuff like that, but
what, when I'm honest?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
sorry, not sorry.
I know you're not.
But I will say that one of those things in that is that people also have to be mindful that a lot of times when they try to use these negative tactics, they have to be mindful because you can easily slip into the realm of your conflict turns into combat. When whatever you're having the disagreement about or whatever you're mad or upset about, you can very easily go from doing these passive things of silent treatment, withholding stuff, giving negative body language, to actually trying to go into, I would say, going from that defensive to that offensive realm.
Right.
Where now you're trying to sabotage and do things against the other person. I think like, in marriage and spouse, it's, I'm not going to turn the alarm on for them. Or I'm not going to get up and make them breakfast. Or I'm not going to put gas in their car. When you do things to sabotage the person, because I'll say that the enemy is very slide in the way that he starts speaking into your ear, and because you're in a hurt, offended state, right? Offense as an offended state, that now you turn into the offensive state, the offensive state, where you're now trying to do things and you feel justified in it.
Right.
But I say even in that, like, okay, not turning off the spouse's alarm or not setting your spouse's alarm so they don't wake up to go to work and they either miss late or they're late for work. And so now you're putting their job in jeopardy, which puts your livelihood and way of life in jeopardy.
Right, right.
Or you don't cook them breakfast and so now they're hungry and pass out or weak, or anything.
But I think too, like kind of going back to your question of, who is it really hurting? Because, I remember like for you being an introvert, like in the earlier years of our marriage, there would be times when you would just shut down and you would kind of go within yourself and not talk to me, and it was really, yes, it hurt me because I wanted you to express yourself and talk and, kind of get it out. But it also, more importantly, hurt you because you would internalize the things that hurt you, I guess you would say, or the things that I had said, and you would pretty much start allowing the enemy, as you said, to talk to you, and it would hurt you to a point where you would start almost like sabotaging yourself,
Okay, I don't necessarily remember or agree with that, but if that was what you remember, okay. Well, no, if that's your perception, then I would say for me it was more of agree with the fact of internalizing things, and I think when we went through our rough patch this year that was the main culprit, because stuff that I internalized or held on to, for years, just kind of hit its tipping point, and so that's when it all came out. But yeah, I think that, I will agree in the fact that you internalize it and then it starts working against you because you speak about it and you use it and you start doing self-talk and everything else. So I can see that. Again, I don't necessarily say that was me, but I will say, it is a possibility. I think kind of the other realm in the aspect of that you need to be mindful of it is if you're not talking to your spouse, if you're not giving your spouse a meal, like if you're not cooking breakfast for them or you're not packing their lunch, or you get home first and instead of cooking dinner, you swing to the fast food place and you get you something to eat. And I say this goes for both sides because I cook just as much as you do and everything. But I think
that's a negative. You cook, but
I used to
cameos. You do not
yes,
cook as much as I do.
I used to cook.
Okay.
Actually, I used to cook more than you.
You used to,
right?
But that was years ago. So let's just be clear, okay?
I mean,
hey. All right.
Anywho, but
you cook well.
The problem is getting back on track.
Okay, thank you.
The problem is that when you are intentionally leaving stuff out, when you're intentionally not doing things, then you are opening the path for somebody else to do those things.
Right.
So if you're not cooking your spouse breakfast, or you're not making sure your spouse has food for breakfast, you didn't go to the grocery store last night, so now your wife doesn't have coffee to drink in the morning, or that sandwich, or that toaster strudel, or whatever it is, then you open it up for that way. Well, now they have to stop at Starbucks, and they get to know that barista. Or a coworker at work always, oh, hey, I noticed you didn't have breakfast. I know you didn't have your coffee, so I stopped and got you coffee.
And it kind of just reminds me of just like what that scripture is saying, that don't give the devil a foothold. Like, you know, I feel that it is so important, especially in a marriage, that you do not give the enemy or anyone room or space to come in, because those snakes be watching. Like, they're watching you, and they are ready to strike at any time that you're not that you give them room to, you know. And I think that is something that is so important, is that you are the primary gatekeepers of your marriage, of your friendship. Like, you are that gatekeeper, and whatever space or room you give, you are allowing or disallowing someone to come in and take hold of what your responsibility should be.
Right.
You know, so.
And also, the thing is, if you, and this is, well, and it's for the single and the married. If you're single and you're dating, or you're engaged with someone that you have plans to build a future with, and to develop and build something with, the question becomes, why would you want to sabotage that? Why would you want to work against that?
Right.
And if you're already in a relationship with someone, if you're already married, why would you want to sabotage and destroy what you've already built?
Right.
Because you're taking a one-time grievance or one-time situation and trying to mess up a permanent long-term thing, you know.
And I think too, if you think about it, like, your spouse is such an extension of you. And so when you hurt you are ultimately hurting your spouse. And so I always, you know, feel like, you know, even in a friendship, like, if you never want to intentionally hurt that person, because you really love and care for that person. And so if they're telling you, this bothers me, this hurts me, why would you continue to do it?
Right.
You know, you are ultimately, actions speak louder than words, and you're ultimately saying, I don't care about you. You know. So.
Well, and especially if you have children, if children are involved, because, you know, as we always say, that marriage is the house that the family lives in. So if you're sabotaging your marriage, you are ultimately sabotaging the house.
You're demolishing it.
Yeah, that you live in. So in all of that, so then how can somebody fight fair? What are the steps you want to fight fair? Because, you know, in the article, Want a Better Marriage, Learn to Fight Fair in 5 Easy Steps, Casey and Megan Caston, I wanted to say Carson, but Caston, you know, they talk about, and one thing they say, that if you want to make a better marriage, you have to make a better you.
Right. And I always, even when I'm talking to my couples, you know, I always say that your marriage is as strong as you are. You are strong together as you are individually, you know, and so two people are bringing two separate sets of baggage, two separate sets of issues. And so if you can work on you guys individually, then you're going to be able to work on each other together and be stronger with that. Right. So with the steps of fighting fair, the first one is maintain control. And this was basically when we were talking in the article, it talked about how a lot of times we get in a flooded state, like where our emotions kind of take over, and we basically start moving into this fight or flight situation. And so once that happens, like the blood starts leaving our brain that actually controls or regulates emotion, and we start going all over the place. Okay, and I think this one is such an important step, because when we can actually cool down and take a step back, we can not say things that are pretty much these fiery darts at our spouse. And so it's with this being able to maintain control, we have to be able to have cue words like I need a break, or time out, so that you can take that time to cool off before you're coming and lashing out at your spouse or your friend.
Yeah. And so number 2, and this is one that I think we both are constantly working on, is the never interrupt.
Yes. And I know that I struggled heavily with this in the beginning of our marriage, and I still at times will relapse and struggle because I will start to listen to respond instead of listening to understand.
Because there's a lot of times where you get on me about interrupting you and cutting you off, and then so I stop and I'll listen to you, and then when I start talking, oh, but that's not, and it's like, but wait, you can't do what you told me not to do. So,
and so with that, I always say, don't play the lawyer. You're not in the argument to prove your case, and I think that the best way, one of the things that they were saying, was to have a tangible item, so that person, as long as they have that item, they have the floor, pretty much. I thought about with Lord of the Flies, which is a book that everybody used to read back in the day, and it was the famous line of "I've got the conch," and it was basically that person that had that was the one in charge of speaking. And so that's another strategy that you can have, but more so listen to understand, which means that you got to listen to everything they say before you enter or before you say.
And
something.
As we always say, hearing is not listening, and listening is not hearing.
Exactly.
The third step is do not bring up the past. The past is the past.
The past is the past. And so stay present with the issue at hand. I think when we bring up grudges and old things that probably, have been talked about before, and we bring them back up, it really has an underlining of unforgiveness. And it also indicates a seed of bitterness. And I always say that bitterness is basically the rotten fruit of resentment. When we are resenting that person for something and we never deal with it, we never forgive, or we never handle it, then it can stay and it can grow into bitterness. And so, yeah.
Now, the one caveat I will say to this, and I'll say this is because this was me, is if it's ongoing issues that you have not addressed before. And so if it's something that has been repeating itself, and you've kind of just gone with the flow with it, you've never brought it up, then I think you can bring up the past to show the pattern. But then once you've brought it up, then if you have another argument about, you can't bring it up again because you've already talked about it and got it up, and you can't, which a lot of people love to do. You can't say this is just like, because even when you say this is just like, well, I'm not talking about the situation. I'm just saying I'm not talking about what happened. It's a similar, and you're still bringing up the past. You're just trying to wrap it. It's like the fruitcake from last Christmas. You just wrapped it up in a
something different wrapping. Right. Yeah. And true love holds no record. And I think too, like you said, you bring up that old fruitcake just wrapped up in a different wrapping. And one of the things is that it is so important. I think it's okay to bring it up if it hasn't been brought up before, but I think that it's important not to bombard and overwhelm your spouse with those issues back to back to back within the same argument. If you're talking about one issue, don't bring up and another thing, because it can cause more headache than it not.
And something that just came to me, if it's an issue that you only think about when you are in the argument, be mindful of that. Because it's like, if it's something that's never bothered you before, that's never gotten on your nerves, but now that you're in the middle of the argument, it comes up, be mindful of that. Because I ask you to test where it's coming from. Right. Yeah.
Right. Because it could not even have anything to do with that person that you're arguing with. The next one is do not criticize. And I think this one's a big one too. Because when you start criticizing the person and not the issue, it can stop becoming constructive and start becoming personal. Like I'm no longer upset with the dishes not being washed. Now I am accusing you of being dirty. And I think that's one of the things that we have to realize is that when we have to be careful with criticizing.
Because I just went blank. I can't think of what the term is, but when it's not casting,
projecting.
That's when the issue is one thing, but you're projecting it onto something else. So.
And so that's where it's like, just be careful, because the issue's not the problem anymore. You are.
Right.
And that can really be cutting and damaging, not only to that person, but to your relationship.
But if you the problem, then you the problem. I'm fine.
Whatever. And the last and final step to fighting fair is apologize. Be okay with saying you're sorry. And a proper apology is not justification or, defending.
Well, I wouldn't have to apologize if you ain't.
Right. So a proper apology is not any of that. It's not defending. It's not justifying. But it is acknowledging your wrongs or your wrong that you did. And then acknowledging that you hurt. Like there was hurt ensued on that person. And also expressing remorse and asking for forgiveness.
Yeah.
Because
truly, if the whole point of the argument is to come to some form of reconciliation. You know, you perceived, whether your perception is right or wrong, you perceived a wrong, you perceived a fault, you perceived something. And in that, you are seeking to reconcile to your spouse, to your significant other, to your friend. You know, the whole point is that you want to be reconciled to them. And so, you know, because you know, I think of the passage that comes to me is that, you know, if you go to offer your sacrifice and you think of someone that has wronged you, go and be reconciled to them. Right. You know, because ultimately, like, you want to address that hurt. Right. And you really can't move on if there is a hurt that you're experiencing due to someone else. And I think the biggest thing, like, with that is, even if they don't apologize, you know, you need to be reconciled to them. Like, I remember I had a supervisor who, you know, came and apologized to me because they had a misconception about me. I had no idea, you know, and they even said that in their apology. It's like, hey, I know you never knew that I thought this, but this is what I thought. And, you know, and yes, in my mind, I was like, oh, okay, thank you. It wasn't, even what they thought wasn't true, and it wasn't going to change my actions, but it was still that whole thing of appreciating the apology and the reconciliation. And I think that's the biggest thing, that it's not about them, it's about you. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. And I think, too, what a lot of people do not realize is many times a true apology will put out the fire. A true apology many times is what that other person needs for the offense to be reconciled, to be calmed. You know, it's almost like putting cool water on a fire. It just will put it out. It will put out that argument. Because most people just want you to own up to your stuff. Right. You know, they just want you to take responsibility and accountability for you hurting them, for you wronging them, you know. And when you say, I'm sorry, but, and give a reason of why, you know, that's not a true apology, you know. But that's the thing I don't think people realize, is that sometimes a true apology will put out the fire before it even gets started.
And I would say that the bonus step, or the bonus thing that wasn't in there, and it goes back to that second step of never interrupting, is the realization that their perception may not be your perception. Right. You know, like, and that even happened during this episode, where it's like, okay, I don't see it, but that's your perception, so okay. You know, a lot of times we can't tell people what they think or what they believe. I'll rewind that. We can, and we do it so many times, but you can't tell somebody what they believe. You can't tell somebody what they should or should not be offended at. Again, we do it a lot, but honestly, you can't tell, because what offends me may not offend you. And I have my own reasons of why it offended me. And that may not be your reason. That may not be your story, but it's mine. Right. So even though you don't agree with it, even though you don't think that they should be offended, if they're offended, then that's their reality. That's their perception, that they were offended.
Right. And I think that goes back to listening to understand. That you don't necessarily have to defend against or to talk against or to talk down their perception. But it helps you, I think, the more that you listen to understand your spouse or your friend and hear where they're coming from, their point of view, it can give you a broader understanding of who they are. And it helps you to be like, okay, well, I didn't see it that way, but I see how you perceived it that way. So therefore, that's where you got offended because you thought that this is what happened. And you can say, well, I see that you perceived it that way. This is how I intended it. Or this is what I meant when I said this. And so you can, when you have that back and forth communication, you have a better understanding and you have a better and stronger relationship because now you understand each other.
Right.
You know? So, yeah. I think this was a good episode though, babe.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, y'all, I hope that y'all enjoyed that. Once again, we are sorry that we have been gone for a couple of weeks, but we're thankful that you came and to listen to us. Baby, I'm so thankful to be loved by you.
And I'm thankful to be loved by you.
And we are thankful to be loved by him.
Bye, y'all. Peace out.
Peace out.
I wanna wake up with you in the morning. Turn this room, turn it to a